what has happened in Australia, and they have what has happened to the ambassador, Iranian ambassador to Australia. They called him persona non grata. It's somehow amazing that Israel is just they called Lula persona non grata. What's going on in Australia?
Well, apparently the Iranian ambassador has been helping carry out genocide in Gaza. Uh, that's as uh, I assume that's what it is, because the Israeli ambassador is uh, doing fine in Australia, and the Australian regime has no problem with him. So it must be the Iranian who's committing crimes against humanity and starving babies and involved in slaughtering families on a daily basis. This is pressure from Netanyahu. We saw a few days ago Netanyahu send a letter to the Australian Prime Minister, effectively threatening him. I tweeted this a couple of hours ago. It was on, I think, uh, anyway, you can find it on either, I think, the Jerusalem Post. If I'm not mistaken. But the Australian regime is under pressure from the Israelis. They, we've seen the protests in Australia, and very impressive. And the people of Australia should be very proud of themselves for taking this stand, both last week and this week. So the Australian government is under a lot of pressure to recognize Palestine, even though it's meaningless. Recognizing Palestine does nothing for the Palestinian people. It's just a piece of paper. But even that is that's being carried out to ease the pressure that the public is putting on them. Um, but the Israeli regime wants doesn't even want that, and they put pressure on the Australian government, and they just simply out of the blue come and blame Iran for all their problems at home. And something that I am concerned about is that uh, since things are really bad for the Israeli regime, and it's going downhill very quickly, the world has turned against it, and you see even Western leaders protesting and complaining and speaking out, even though they're not going to do anything about it. There are no sanctions on Tel Aviv. There are no limitations to the being put on the atrocities being carried out against the Palestinian people, not just in Gaza, but also the West Bank and southern Lebanon, um, across Lebanon. They're carrying out crimes everywhere, and of course Yemen, we just saw a couple of days ago. So there are no limitations being put on them, no sanctions, nothing. But in any case, the world has turned against the regime, and Western elites who are firmly in the uh, camp of the genocidal monsters, they uh, they even have to speak out against the Israelis. So what I'm concerned about is that there may be a false flag operation somewhere in some country against Western interests in the United States, somewhere in Europe, or something directed at Western citizens, so that the Israeli regime could perhaps change the narrative. So this is something that I'm not saying will happen. I have no idea. I have no intelligence or anything like that. But these things have happened often in the past, and what we're seeing in Australia is a small example where the Australian regime tries to distract attention away from what the Israeli regime is doing, and they try to blame Iran for things that have nothing to do with Iran. Iran is the only country in the region that has a Jewish MP in parliament. It has a significant, small but significant Jewish community, and Iran, Jews do not have any problems whatsoever. Iran's problem, of course, is with Zionism. So this is basically a distraction, and they've done it to appease Netanyahu, and it just shows how powerful the Zionist lobby is. It's not just the United States; it expands across the Western world.
Professor Marandi, do you consider what the attack on Yemen as the same sort of is the outcome of desperation in Israel? That's why they were attacking. It seems that they wanted to assassinate the Yemeni leaders and the Houthi leaders. That they failed. That they said we didn't want to do this. We wanted to target some, I don't know, buildings in Yemen. I don't know what was the strategy, but it seems that it was assassination. The main goal was assassination. Your take on that?
Well, we can look at it both ways. The Yemeni missile that targeted Israel obviously got through, and there was impact, and that made the Israeli regime very angry. And that doesn't carrying out assassinations in Yemen doesn't necessarily mean that. I mean, these two could be linked. The assassination attempts could be a sort of revenge because the Yemeni missiles are having an impact, and obviously, people who want to travel to Palestine or people who work there when they feel insecure being there, that harms the Israeli regime in a big way, and it harms it much more than it harms Yemen because Yemen does not have foreign investment. It doesn't have people from abroad working there, and Yemen doesn't have much of they don't have much infrastructure because the Saudis and the Americans have been bombing it for many years. The Saudis and the Americans, they carried out the and the collective West, and the Emiratis and Turkey and Qatar initially were with them too, but they were carrying out a genocidal campaign against the Yemeni people for years, and therefore they don't have that much infrastructure for the Israeli regime to strike, and their military assets are all deep underground. And we saw how the Americans tried for a full month to destroy Yemen's armed forces, and they failed. Trump capitulated. It was clear as day. They gained nothing from the conflict. So the Israeli regime doesn't have capabilities that the Americans don't have. American capabilities are much greater than that of the regime. So if the Americans cannot defeat Yemen, then obviously the Israeli regime can't either. There's no indication that any senior official from Yemen has been martyred. And if someone was martyred, we'd hear it in the news. There would be funerals. So we can say that the Israeli regime did target civilians. They targeted civilian assets like the power plant, but they had no success militarily speaking.
Do you think that if Nobel Peace Prize was for real, Yemen would get it?
Oh
How
yes,
who is going to be your candidate for that?
the Ansarullah would be they would receive the Nobel Peace Prize, but Hezbollah would also be very much there as well. Hezbollah and Ansarullah have done have made enormous sacrifices, and the people of Lebanon and Yemen have made enormous sacrifices to help the people of Gaza. Iran, of course, has made huge sacrifices, but of course, what we see in Lebanon and Yemen is at a different level. What Yemen has done is that they have shown the world that you can boycott the Israeli regime and make them pay a price for the genocide. You can block their trade and have an impact. But sadly, countries like Turkey, Jordan, Egypt, Azerbaijan, the United Arab Emirates, Morocco, in our region alone, they continue to do business as usual with the regime, sending, transporting oil, buying and selling goods. It's and we cannot expect countries in Latin America, although I mean they should, but we cannot expect uh, countries in Latin America and in Africa to cut off ties with the Israeli regime when they see these countries continuing to have diplomatic ties and carry out business transactions. If Turkey had done the moral thing and broken off ties, if the Emirates had done the same, if Morocco and the others had done this, and there would have been a lot of pressure across the global south to cut off ties. And that would have been catastrophic for Tel Aviv. But they showed that they are not with the resistance and they're not with the Palestinians. The governments, of course, not the people. The people across the region are pro Palestinian and anti apartheid and anti Zionist. But I would give the Nobel Peace Prize to the leader of Ansarullah, and the leader of Hezbollah would be a close second.
Yeah.
Of
We
course, Hamas Hamas is fighting for the people of Palestine, but as someone who's trying to, from the outside, to bring an end to this genocide, I would give these two, uh, the leaders of these two organizations, the Nobel Peace Prize. And it's really disturbing how in Lebanon, and those who were criticizing Hezbollah for uh, accepting a ceasefire, I think now they must recognize what pressure Hezbollah is facing. Inside Lebanon, Hezbollah has Western-backed and Takfiri-backed enemies that are constantly stabbing it in the back. And while Hezbollah wants to help the people of Palestine, it has to focus on the traitors in Lebanon and, of course, next door in Syria. We'll now see all of the predictions of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah being fulfilled. In Syria, the regime, the Al Qaeda and ISIS regime of Jolani, is now negotiating with the Israelis, and it's quite possible that they'll come to an agreement. That's exactly what we were all predicting, and of course, that first and foremost, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, and that this whole dirty war in Syria had nothing to do with any revolution, had nothing to do with the emancipation of the Syrian people. It had everything to do with strengthening the Israeli regime, weakening the resistance to this regime, and there was a collaboration of regional regimes led by NATO and the United States in particular. All of this was done to help Israel, and the regime has benefited from it. But the good thing is that everyone has been exposed now. And that I think is worth a lot. Some people say that it doesn't matter, but I think it's worth quite a lot. Everyone has shown their hand. Everyone has shown who they are in the region and beyond. And of course, the Israeli regime, first and foremost, has exposed itself to the world for the genocidal criminals that they are collectively, especially since ordinary people in in Palestine, the Zionists, they support the genocide. So everyone has been exposed, and you can't put a number on that. This is infinitely valuable.
I think when we compare Hezbollah to Yemen, it's somehow different because Hezbollah is under a lot of pressure in Lebanon from inside and from outside. On Yemen, they cannot do anything. As you mentioned, the United States went to the Red Sea, they couldn't do anything. Israel is bombing every day Yemen, and they don't care about what Israel is doing. They're responding to what Israel is doing. This is somehow, I would say, game changer. It's something that doesn't fit in the calculation that the West has in the region.
Absolutely. And in Lebanon, you see that the same Takfiri groups that are standing shoulder to shoulder with the fascists like Sami Jaja and the Lebanese forces and Western regimes, all of them are focused on against Hezbollah rather than against the Israeli regime. Just like in Syria, we have a regime that says our only enemies are Hezbollah and Iran. So these Takfiris never had um, any real animosity towards the Israeli regime. They never supported the Palestinian people. But this is all coming out now. They're supporters in the West, especially those who receive money from oil and gas rich countries in the region. Their news outlets, their media outlets, their their cultural centers, their political organizations. They will continue to try to justify this because they're on the payroll. They'll continue to try to be apologists for these groups. But I think for those who are independent minded, for those who are fair minded, for those who are looking at the region with open eyes, they see the reality. It's become clear as day. These Takfiri groups from day one were a tool of the West, and they've been very useful. And Erdogan and Abdullah of Jordan and the Qatari regime and others, they've worked very hard to help the Americans carry out their policy in the region.
I don't know if you saw the video that shows the British intelligence is gathering information from Gaza to deliver to deliver the information to Israelis. You know, you're looking at the behavior of the British government. On one side, they're trying to say condemn Israel, condemn what's going on in Gaza, starvation, all of that. But you see they're providing intelligence targets to Israel. And Israel is just looking at the outcome. The targets are civilians. They're not killing Hamas. Even Israelis, they're confessing that what they're doing is just killing civilians.
Well, they're not confessing. That document was leaked. It came out that overwhelmingly it is civilians that have been killed, according to the regime itself. And what the British have been doing, they've been doing since day one. They've been providing intelligence, and they will continue to do so. They've been doing it for almost 2 years now. They are a part of this genocide, and they know too. Just like the Israeli document. I mean, that document was secret for us, but it wasn't secret for the allies of the regime. They all knew that there was a genocide being carried out. It's all out in the open. I did an interview just recently, and the host was trying to say, trying not to 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 to, to acknowledge that this was a genocide. And I said the intention from day one was a genocide. If anyone looks at this, if anyone goes back and looks at the South African complaint at the ICJ, which was over a year and a half ago, all the statements that they put together from the Israeli regime's president, the prime minister, the minister of the defense or genocide, and MPs and the Speaker of Parliament, all of them were speaking about genocide. They were saying there are no innocents in Gaza. They were saying we're going to cut off food, water, electricity, medicine. This was all said in October 2023. So for someone today to still try to pretend that this is not a genocide, it's disturbing. It's disturbing to say the least. It's the least that one can do today is to openly declare that this is a genocide. That's the least one could do. What everyone should do is to stand up and to protest and to put pressure on governments to bring this to an end, to cut relations with the Israeli regime, especially people living in our part of the world. We see people across Australia courageously coming to the streets. I'm sure many of them will pay some sort of price or could pay a price for their stance at work and uh, you know in if they're government employees or in the private sector. Some could pay a price for that. And so when people across the world are paying a price, then people in our region should be willing to stand up and be counted.
The Israeli Knesset opposition leader Yair Lapid, he said that the Gaza is turning into Israeli Afghanistan. Do you feel that somehow Netanyahu is losing it's sort of, because he had some sort of leverage over these people in Israel. He still has that. But how do you see this situation for the situation in Gaza, the pressure coming to Netanyahu, and the internal things that are the internal interactions that were happening in Israel?
Well, Nima, you know my view on this, I think, and I think your audience knows this. From the beginning, I believe that the Israeli regime uh, was losing this war, these series of wars, and that everything that it has done has been catastrophic for itself and for the collective West. The West has paid a huge price because the Western regimes have no credibility. Western journalists, legacy media journals have no credibility. Western institutions, no credibility. international institutions dominated by the West have no credibility. That's gone. They put an end to all of this permanently, and they will there's no price tag that you could put on this. There, it's again, it's just the loss for the West is cannot be calculated with numbers. But the Israeli regime, it failed in Gaza. Its image has been destroyed. It's failed in Lebanon. It's failed in Yemen. It's failed everywhere. It's failed everywhere. It's even failed in Syria. I said from the beginning that in Syria it was a tactical loss, and it will continue to be painful for the resistance, for Lebanon, for the people of Syria, and for the people of Palestine, because that front has been basically shut down. But in a sense, it's been a strategic defeat for the Israeli regime and NATO regimes and its allies, because everything that we've been saying for so many years has turned out to be true. The resistance, the axis of resistance has been vindicated. Those who were attacking Hezbollah now see who the traitors in Lebanon are when it comes to the Palestinian people. Those who used to attack Ansarullah and belittle them and support the Saudi genocide and the Emirati genocide, now they see Hezbollah Ansarullah as heroes. The same is true with Iran. Iran, which has paid a huge price, not just during the 12 days. If Iran wasn't, if Iran's support for Gaza was not exceptionally important, there would be no war against Iran. If Iran and if the axis of resistance was not doing so many things to help the Palestinian cause, they wouldn't be attacked in the first place. But the most important thing that comes out of this is that the Israeli regime's image has been demolished. The West's image has been demolished. Those who oppose the resistance, they have been exposed. None of them have done anything for the Palestinian people. Qatar and Saudi Arabia, their sovereign wealth fund, they've invested in Israel through Kushner. They have investments in Israel through Trump's son-in-law. How how far? Where does treason start? And of course, I've explained what other countries have done, and your audience knows it better than I. So I think that since the emperor has no clothes, everyone has been exposed. This is good for the resistance, because people across the world now, the uh, the everything has become clear. The fog has uh, gone away. The fog has disappeared. We see who's stands with the Palestinian people and who doesn't. And Netanyahu, he can continue with these wars. He may carry out another attack on Iran. He may continue to bomb Yemen. He bombs Lebanon regularly and murders Lebanese citizens on a daily basis, something that the Western media ignores, even though they have offices in Beirut. But it's hurting Israel. The contempt for the Israeli regime across the globe is being solidified. It's the longer this lasts, it becomes stronger. It becomes more permanent. It is not going to escape what it has been carrying out over the past 2 years. So, in my opinion, the longer this lasts, it's like in the old movies where someone would fall in quicksand, and the more he moved around, the more he would sink in the quicksand. Although apparently that's not how quicksand works, but in real life. But anyway.
Yeah. On Saturday, I talked with uh, Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Aguilar. He was in Gaza. He reported on what's going on in Gaza. When I asked him, how did you find the situation in Gaza? He said something, I think it's so deep to just think of it. He said that the ideology of IDF, when you work with them, is that all Arabs and Muslims are the enemy. They have to be killed. And
Yes.
so he said, so what could you imagine the outcome of that in Gaza?
There's no difference between ISIS and Al Qaeda and Zionism in that respect. They consider anyone that stands in their way as worthy of death. And not only do they hate Arabs and Muslims, they hate everyone. They hate Christians. We see how they treat Christians in Palestine. It's only the Christian Zionists who have been active in trying to fool ordinary people in the United States and across the West, or religious Christians, about the nature of Israel with their cult and the nonsense that they promote. But yeah, I've seen a couple of his interviews, and they are uh, very painful to watch. It's not something that is a secret to us because we know they speak out openly. Just a couple of days ago, an Israeli MP, she spoke about, or maybe yesterday, she spoke about extermination. She said these are Amalek, and we shouldn't be ashamed to wipe them out. That's how it is. But the West, they support this. Western journalists, they support this. If they don't support it, they're too cowardly to do anything about it. Either they're bought off, or they have the Epstein-like problems. And now with AI and the new technologies, they can obtain dirty. They can obtain all sorts of information on people through their laptops and cell phones and tablets, and there are so many different means to gather information on people. That's why your your audience, especially since many, I'm sure most of them are pro-Palestine, they should be very wary about their uh, being having their personal information access through cell phones or through laptops or through tablets, and the images that can be recorded through all of these.
We've learned that Armenia and Britain have agreed to elevate their relations to the level of strategic partnership. Do, do you understand what does the United Kingdom want from Armenia? What is that strategic partnership? What do they need to come to Armenia?
Well, you said something earlier, and I forgot to respond to that, and that was about the British intelligence support for the Israeli regime through Cyprus. By the way, the planes and the drones fly from Cyprus. So Cyprus is deeply involved in this Holocaust, and their leaders have blood on their hands, a lot of blood on their hands. They're just like Netanyahu. They're no different. But but the British, that's what they're doing in Ukraine as well. The British are the most extreme of all of the entire West. Even though the UK is collapsing and the economy is falling apart, and they're probably, the situation in the UK is probably worse than any other European power, major European power, and the situation in Europe is not good at all. But despite all that, the British are the most uh, fanatical when it comes to Ukraine and Russia, and their support for the Israeli regime is quite stunning and extraordinary. But they don't, they're not powerful. They don't have the ability to project power. They don't have more than a few thousand troops that they can send here and there. It's so the the government in um, Baku, as well as the Armenian government, both of them, I think, are misreading the situation. Baku, instead of trying to have good relations with Iran and Russia, it's still under the influence of the United States. It has become an ally of Netanyahu and the Israeli regime, whereas its neighbors are Iran and Russia. Its two key neighbors are Iran and Russia. And the same is true with Armenia. The Armenian government, instead of trying to have good relations with Russia, and instead of ignoring uh, Iran's some of the things that Iran has been telling them to do or not to do, they have put faith in countries that are never going to do anything for them. NATO is not going. I don't even know how long NATO is going to last, but Armenia cannot rely on the strength of the British. So I don't take anything that the British, any agreement between the UK and Armenia as important, especially as the war in Ukraine continues. The war in Ukraine, Nima, will continue to drain Western resources. Maybe Trump will stop funding it. And of course, we don't know what the CIA will do because they have all sorts of hidden money here and there. But the Europeans, apparently, from what we're seeing, they're going to continue waging this war. And so the European economy is going to go downhill even further. It's been bad. It's been going from bad to worse. So they're in no position to change the balance of power in the Caucasus. Remember, these are the seven dwarves, as I don't know who first said this, but these are the seven dwarves who we saw. Maybe it was George Galloway, I'm not sure. But these, the seven dwarves sitting in front of Trump and behaving like children at school, or at least they look like children at school. These are not the sort of leaders that are going to be able to do anything in the Caucasus. And as I said before, Iran will not allow borders to be changed, and Iran will not allow its access to Armenia and through Armenia to Georgia or the Black Sea or Russia to be blocked. It won't happen. If that happens, there will be war. It's as simple as that. And the United States is not going to go to war with Iran over the southern province of Armenia and the Republic of Azerbaijan. They would be very foolish if they even tried anything against Iran. So as long as Armenia's sovereignty is preserved, then Iran doesn't have a problem. But as soon as that changes, then there will be military confrontation. Iran has already based large numbers of troops on the border. Sometimes you see things online. Someone quotes something that some politician in Iran said, or someone says something that he shouldn't have said. But Iran's policy is clear as day.